I'm Catherine Ross, and I'm here live from the NYSE with Jim Cramer. Jim, welcome back. How
Thank
was your
you.
trip? You were in Italy, right?
Oh my God, it was fantastic. We're fortunate enough to have a house in Tuscany, about 20 minutes from Florence, and it was my father's on his bed death wish. He said, "Mom loved Florence. Why don't you buy a house in Florence?" And I turned to my wife, who's a real estate person, Lisa. I said, "All right, go ahead." And by the way, I know this sounds strange, but the houses there are a fraction of what they are of what a small, let's say, 3-bedroom apartment, not small, in Brooklyn. And the reason why is because there's no mortgage market. You have to pay in cash.
Sounds like I need to move myself to Italy.
Well, there's so much that's good. This time we went, I love to travel with friends. I went with my friends, Michael Haley was my best man, and Ellen Haley, and then Beebs, we call him that, and Lori, the Beebouts. And I have to tell you, we visited a couple things that I do want to point out. Our favorite was a chef table fellow, Dario. You can Google Dario Chef Table. Fabulous meat place. We went to a place in Fiesole, which is north of Florence, called St. Michela, which is another fantastic restaurant. We biked, if you do like to bike, in Lucca, which is just fantastic. And it was mostly fun, but I think that you need to know they love Americans. Not many people speak English. Tavernelli is the nearest town to where we are. If you want to look on the map, most people don't know these towns, but it is fun for Americans, and I suggest that people do the equivalent of Airbnb. You want to go to Red Savannah. That's the best agency, and that's where the real value is, because remember, you cannot have a car in Florence. People don't realize you can't drive in Florence. So you want to be with Red Savannah, you want to be on the tram line. That's where we are. We're close to the tram. I'm not that I'm a travel agent, but I just gave you some real good tips.
Now we talked about Italy, but let's talk about China, because this weekend we saw President Trump.
From China.
She did? What did you think?
She loved it. Oh my, did she love it! And there, by the way, she said you need a translator. Our son is fluent, and it comes in handy. But I do believe that there was a major reversal by the president. There had been a plan, and the plan was to bankrupt Huawei. The hardliners wanted to bankrupt it. Obviously, that's not the case. So everything from Nike to Apple to Broadcom to Action Alert's name, Nvidia and Lam Research are correctly flying. That's a correct move, and people need to know that.
You wrote about the meeting between...
I got a cold there.
So you wrote about the meeting between Trump and Xi for your Real Money column. You talked about the biggest takeaways that you had from the meeting.
Yeah.
Based on those takeaways, how would you rate Trump's performance?
Well, that's a hard thing, because I'm a hardliner, and I was surprised. If you like the stock market, short term, it's very big. Longer term, you would be wondering, because if Huawei is indeed the 5G leader, that's not that great for America. Now, I go back and forth with my wife all the time, because my father's, the mills that my father represented, almost all were wiped out by the Chinese. So I came back, I lived in a house where my father would come home and close the door, and we could never figure out why. But it was because another mill was put out of business by the Chinese. So I'm scarred. My wife, who just came back from China, and my son, who came back from China, don't even understand what the heck I'm talking about, because they say that the people remain great friends of ours. And I think that's true.
Well, and clearly the markets appreciated the meeting, because we saw the S&P open at a record high.
Yeah, well, the markets are basically saying that the uncertainty is over, because the uncertainty directly had to do with the fact that the new tariffs seemed like they were, if anything, etched in stone. They were going to start at 10% and move up as she got harder and harder. And now I'm wondering whether it's quite the contrary to what the press is saying, that she agreed to do something. And by the way, it didn't hurt she that the president went to see that nut job in North Korea. Because remember, he's owned by China. So who knows what went on. But the hardliners were surprised by what occurred.
What's the biggest risk going forward? Is it the tariffs?
No. The biggest risk to me with Trump is that he did not know necessarily what he did. I think that he did what he did for the farmers. That's what was behind this. It's an election year. And I think he may not have understood the subtleties of Huawei and what can be sold to them and what can't. And that is, that's going to confuse a lot of people.
Jim, oil is back in the headlines this morning. OPEC is meeting in Vienna.
Brian Sullivan doing some great work. Whenever oil's up, people believe it's because of demand. I believe it's only up because of a cutback in supply. Exxon was up $1.89 in pre-market trading. You have to understand that we have so much oil here that we control the price. And our rig count's down a little bit, but not nearly as much I would be expected year over year. And our natural gas, our electricity, here's something that's never talked about. Our electricity use is down 7% year over year, even though we've got a very big increase in GDP. Our electricity use has been going down year after year after year, and that's because of conservation, particularly light bulbs, by the way. So you've got this glut of natural gas. So the drilling gets shifted to oil, and the oil gets shifted rather rapidly into export. So they can do whatever they want in OPEC. As long as natural gas stays low, and by the way, we're exporting a huge amount of natural gas now, 6 million BCF, it doesn't even matter. As long as natural gas stays low, the drilling's going to continue in oil. As long as the oil continues, OPEC can do whatever the heck it wants. We're going to be up to 17 million barrels very shortly. So they can cut back 1 million barrels. It doesn't mean anything. And we'll just take that we'll just take that share right back.
Let's take oil in an investing education question here, because many investors, including and especially millennials such as myself, don't invest in oil. Is that a risk, or should they be investing in oil?
I talk about this a lot with my writing partner Matt Horween. Millennials won't buy fossil fuels. One of the reasons why they often look, we own BP for action alerts. BP had a fabulous quarter. BP was a beneficiary of the refinery problem in Philadelphia. BP it's finished. It's finally almost all with the condo payments, and it can't move up. Even though it's got a great yield, it can't move up. That trade has moved on. The only thing positive that happened was Occidental and Chevron got in a bidding war, which therefore might have mean that Hess, people think is in play, but the fossil fuel trade is done because of millennials. If they could get oil above 65, all that would do was create even more drilling. I'd rather own the Chinese plays, the Nikes, the Broadcoms, betting that China is back than I would any fossils. In other words, I like tech more than I like fossil.
Speaking of Chinese plays, real money's stock of the day is Nvidia.
Yes.
And following the meeting between Trump and Xi, we saw the semiconductors move up, and I'm wondering, why should investors pay attention specifically to Nvidia?
Okay, I think Nvidia can go much higher, and my reasoning for that is because Jensen Huang told me, without a doubt, that the Chinese would approve his incredibly important for the edge of the network purchase of Mellanox, an Israeli company. As long as Huawei was out there being hounded by our country, correctly I'd have to tell you, I think the possibility of that deal closing was minimal. Now I have to believe that possibility jumps gigantically, and that therefore if Nvidia gets that Mellanox deal goes to 200 in a snap.
And investors looking for a deep dive into Nvidia can head over to realmoney.com, where our experts are breaking down what you need to know. Jim, to wrap up, we got to talk about Boeing, which came out over the weekend. We saw headlines that the DOJ is looking into the 787 Dreamliner production.
DOJ, I think, won't matter. I think I interviewed the CEO of L3, which is now L3 Harris. They make simulators, and he indicated that there are some airlines that, one voluntarily, maybe more, that are insisting their pilots get training on the 737 MAX. Shocking. It was a major news event. No one seemed to catch it. It means to me that there are real issues here, but that the pilots are going to get it worked out, and therefore you're going to fly the 737 MAX by year end.
But there's so many negative headlines. Is that it doesn't kill
I just gave you
investors?
the answer.
No? That's it?
Yep.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, Jim, thank you. All right, guys, we are now heading over to our Action Alerts Plus daily rundown show. You can head over to actionalertsplus.com, where we'll be talking about G20 and more.
Yeah. Oh, a lot to talk about.
We got so much to talk about because Jim's back. All right, guys, thanks for watching. I'm Catherine Ross, and we'll see you tomorrow.